Okay, today we're jumping into the work of psychologist Albert Bandura. He's a real giant in the field, and his social cognitive theory completely changed how we think about learning, behavior, and even morality. And the wild part? It all started pretty much by accident.
So let me just ask you this. How much of your life, your job, who you hang out with, the things you love, is just the result of pure random chance? It's a question Bandura himself got really interested in, probably because his own career got kicked off by a total twist of fate.
So the story goes, when Bandura was in college, he was in this carpool with a bunch of pre-med and engineering students who all had these ridiculously early classes. He needed something to do to kill time before his own classes started, so he just randomly picked a psychology course to fill the gap. And boom, he was hooked. That one little scheduling coincidence changed everything for him. This experience was so powerful that he actually gave it a name, a fortuitous event. It's basically a chance encounter, a totally unplanned moment that has this huge outsized impact on the direction your life takes. And this idea, that chance is a huge player in our lives, well, it became a really important piece of his much bigger theory. So what was that big idea? Well, Bandura argued that our behavior isn't just a one-way street. It's not just our environment pushing us around, and it's not just our internal thoughts pulling the strings. He saw it as this dynamic three-way interaction. Now, the official name is triadic reciprocal causation. I know, it sounds super academic, but the idea is actually something we all kind of get. It just means that who we are is the result of this constant back and forth dance between three key things. And what are those three things? First, you've got the person. That's all your internal stuff, your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings. Then there's the environment, your physical space, the people around you. And finally, your behavior, the actual things you do. The absolute key here is that they all influence each other, all the time. Your thoughts shape your actions can change your environment, and your environment, in turn, can change how you think. Let's make it super simple. Picture a kid begging for a brownie. The begging itself, that's the behavior. The fact that their dad is right there, that's the environment. And the kid's little thought in their head that says, hey, begging usually works on this guy, that's the person factor. Now, if the dad gives in and hands over the brownie, it reinforces the kid's belief, which makes that begging behavior way more likely to happen again in that environment. See? It's all connected, a three-way street. So how on earth did Bandura go about proving that we learn so much just from watching what's happening around us? Well, this leads us to his most famous and, let's be honest, his most controversial study, the Bobo Doll Experiment. The whole experiment was designed to tackle a question that we are still wrestling with today. Does watching violence actually make us more violent? See, back then, a lot of people believed in this idea of catharsis, that watching someone else be aggressive kind of gets it out of your system. Bandura, he wasn't so sure. The setup was really simple. One group of kids watched an adult just go town on this inflatable clown doll named Bobo, punching it, kicking it, yelling at it. Another group of kids, the control group, didn't see any of that. Then each child was put in a room all alone with that same Bobo doll. The big question was, what were they going to do? The results were absolutely staggering. The kids who saw the adult being aggressive weren't just a little more aggressive. No, they performed the exact same aggressive things they had just watched. They showed about twice as much aggression as the kids who hadn't seen the model. They had learned the behavior, step by step, just by watching. This experiment just completely shattered that whole catharsis theory. It was powerful proof that watching violence isn't some harmless release. Instead, it can actually provide a blueprint, a script, for our own future behavior. It was one of the first major warnings about the potential real-world impact of violent media. But Bandura's theory goes even deeper, and it gets into some pretty dark territory. It also gives us a framework for understanding how seemingly good, normal people can end up doing truly awful things. He called this the moral off switch. The technical term for it is moral disengagement, and it's basically a set of psychological loopholes we use to convince ourselves that our own ethical rules don't really apply in a certain situation. It's what lets a person act inhumanely without feeling that crushing guilt. So one of the most common ways we do this is by displacing responsibility. We just tell ourselves, hey, it's not my fault, I was just following orders, or someone else is really to blame. A perfect everyday example is an employee who messes up but immediately blames their boss for their own poor performance. By passing the buck, they get to sidestep feeling accountable. Now, a much more sinister way this works is by blaming the victim. This is where a perpetrator will actually justify what they did by claiming the victim had it coming. The source material gives the really disturbing example of a rapist blaming his victim's clothing. It's a horrifying cognitive trick that allows the perpetrator to see their own terrible act as a justified response, effectively flipping their moral switch to the off position. So, after all this, chance encounters, aggressive dolls, and these moral off switches, what's the big takeaway from Bandura's work? I think it's this. We are all the time, both the student and the teacher. We are both learners and models.
So let's boil it down. First, what we see really matters. We learn so much just by observing other people. Second, we are not just puppets. Yeah, our environment shapes us, but we also have the power to shape our environment. Third, never ever underestimate the power of pure chance to completely change your life. And finally, and this one is so important, we have to remember that we all have this capacity for moral disengagement, and we've got to be vigilant about keeping that switch on.
You know, Bandura's work was groundbreaking in a world with like 3 TV channels. But today, we are swimming in a literal ocean of digital models, influencers, creators, random people online. And all of that leaves us with a really critical question to ask ourselves. In this world of endless models, who are you choosing to learn from?